Welcome back, everyone. So far today, we have learned and seen and heard of the devastating ways in which greenhouse gases are affecting our planet, where a substantial portion of methane comes from, and innovative ways to reduce our carbon footprint. So and innovative ways that include changes in agriculture, changes in the way we grow our food, the way we eliminate waste of food, and through technology. So how do other industries achieve net zero? Well, we're gonna learn. Right now, I'd like to welcome Patrick Flynn. He is Head of Global Sustainability for Salesforce. He is here, he's gonna join me on stage. Come on, Patrick. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thanks.
All right, make yourself at home.
Okay.
All right. So when you think of Salesforce as a cloud company, it inherently sounds like you wouldn't have a carbon footprint. But today you had a very important announcement. So I'd like to start off with that if we could.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's an exciting day. Thank you everybody for being here at the Javits Center for the Nest Summit, part of Climate Week NYC. Thanks for joining me on stage, Layla. At Salesforce, we know that business is the greatest platform for change, and that the true purpose of business is to improve the state of the world. Today, we find ourselves in the middle of a climate emergency. Planet Earth doesn't know how to scream more loudly for help than what we're seeing around us right now. And so it's time for everyone, all individuals, all organizations, all companies, to step forward and do all that they can. And, you know, to me, climate is about so much more than just the environment. Climate is first and foremost about equality. It's those with the least who suffer the most when our planet goes awry. Not to mention the fact that those of us who happen to be alive today are robbing elements of a vibrant, flourishing future that we've all come, you know, this type of planet that we live on, from all future generations. So there's really a fundamental equality issue at play with climate, and that is really what drives me personally. But it's also the best way to create economic resilience, and yes, of course, deliver on environmental impact. So in the face of this big moment where we need companies and leaders to do all of the above, we had a bunch of really exciting news today. So number one, Salesforce is net zero now. Not 2050, not 2040, not 2030, now.
And at 100%.
And 100% renewable. We've achieved that goal. A milestone, a very important milestone on our goal to see all grids 24/7 clean and renewable.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
That's a huge feat.
Yeah.
That's a tremendous feat.
And it's taken a little bit of time. Well, we'll start maybe with the renewable energy one. We've been at it since 2013. As a cloud company, if you look at our operational footprint, a lot of the greenhouse gas emissions come from the electricity that supports our data centers. Now, we don't own any of our data centers, so we don't actually pay that many utility bills directly. So we've worked either through data center providers or with the help of virtual power purchase agreements, brought new renewable energy onto the grid so that on an annual basis we are matching clean energy, clean electricity to all of the electricity we use globally, data centers and offices and so forth. But like I said, it's a milestone worth celebrating, but also that sort of annual matching 100% renewable energy achievement is just a step. What we really need is 24/7 clean and renewable grids, so we are advocating on Capitol Hill for policies that bring forward, like the CEPP, that bring forward more renewable energy onto the grids more broadly. So net zero, and we'll get into that, I'm sure, 100% renewable energy. We also announced that we're over 40 million trees towards our 100 million tree goal for this decade, and really focused on equality and co-benefits and all the great things that nature-based solutions can bring. And also announced that we've put a whole bunch of new product features into Salesforce Sustainability Cloud.
If I can just stop you for 1 second. So when you started this back in 2013, if I have my years correct here, what was the first thing, though, that you did in that journey towards net zero?
Yeah, so let me explain how we're thinking about net zero and our net zero achievement. First and foremost, we need to all recognize that there's no success for one company or one country only. When it comes to the climate crisis, it is one goal, one outcome. We need a very rapid and just transition to a 1.5 degree future, and no company should be celebrating net zero in the context of a world that fails in that. So, at the highest level, it's a commitment to do everything we can to achieve this shared global goal together. Next step, number 2, is we are going to decarbonize our own full value chain, Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3, in line with a 1.5 degree future, which more or less is 50% reduction in location-based emissions by 2030 and near zero by 2040. And as the science continues to illuminate what the right 1.5 degree pathway is, our goal is to at least match that with our full value chain. And so, avoiding and reducing is paramount. What we've done is, across the major parts of our business, real estate, infrastructure, supply chain, travel, developed decarbonization strategies and published those this morning as well, so everybody can see, as part of our climate action plan, the steps we're taking to put avoidance and reduction of emissions at the very front of the strategy. After that is when renewable electricity comes into the picture, and again, really proud that we've reached this 100% renewable energy milestone. And after that, and only after that, if we have any emissions that remain across Scope 1, 2, and 3, we are going to compensate for those with high-quality carbon credits. And we've had panels earlier today even about what high quality means, and we feel like accelerating that last step of investing in high-quality carbon credits to compensate fully for your Scope 1, 2, 3 emissions is a critical piece of the puzzle that every company can step forward with, which sends finance to the places of the world that needs it most, stops deforestation, changes people's lives, upholds equality, and we can't overlook that last step because we need all of the above strategies, the long-term, the medium-term, and these immediate steps as well.
So Salesforce really is taking the lead on all of these things, and you become the example of which companies who use Salesforce can follow. You mentioned the 4 scopes, 1, 2, and 3. You're still working on the 4th. I just wanted to go through the list.
Sure.
One more time. So work from anywhere.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Infrastructure,
Yep.
business travel, and supply chain.
Yeah.
So what's the 4th one that is?
So there's a slight distinction here. In greenhouse gas accounting, you've got bear with me, quick flyover. Scope 1, direct emissions like tailpipe emissions or boiler emissions from things that you own and operate. Scope 2, indirect emissions from things you have operational control over. A lot of that for most companies is typically electricity-related emissions. And then Scope 3 emissions, which is really everything else. And there are 15 subcategories of Scope 3, some of them related to upstream and some of them related to downstream. For a software company like Salesforce, a lot of our emissions is in that upstream Scope 3 category, the embodied emissions from the purchase of technology equipment, running data centers, and so forth.
I see.
And so because of that, the supply chain element of our decarbonization strategy becomes critically important. So let me go there. But just to make a fine point of it, those 3 scopes are different than the 4 decarbonization strategies that we lay out in the climate action plan. But let's talk supply chain for a second, because I'm really proud of what we're doing here. First, let's recognize that, we've got, when we talk about value chain, you've got links in the chain beginning with places way up in the economy where things are burned or grown and where a lot of the emissions happens. And then you've got a customer and another customer all the way down. And Salesforce, as a services business, find ourselves pretty far down most value chains. Every link in that value chain is a customer relationship with its supplier. And so for Salesforce, as the world's leader in the customer relationship, it's incredibly important for us to show what it looks like to be a deeply, passionately engaged customer demanding climate action upstream in hopes that that signal gets sent by that supplier to their suppliers all the way up to the places that need to decarbonize and need to decarbonize now.
Right.
And so one of the things we did, we've got a 1.5 degree science-based target. The Scope 3 piece of which is that suppliers representing 60% of our Scope 3 emissions will set science-based targets of their own by 2024. We are already over halfway there, just a year or two in. The supply chain decarbonization movement is one of the brightest spots in all of climate action right now. And we took it a step further in April. We notified all of our suppliers that effective immediately, climate would be part of all standard purchasing agreements from Salesforce. We notified them and we published this legal document. Everybody can check it out. Please take it, use it, give us feedback. It requires them to set science-based targets, disclose their Scope 1, 2, and 3 greenhouse gas emissions, and deliver carbon neutral goods and services to us or pay. And so to me, it's a first of its kind, very direct, clear, unequivocal signal that there's a customer out there that really wants bold climate action now. And the response has just been really great.
I can imagine. How do you endeavor to get your clients, customers on board?
Yeah.
And in practice?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of the model the right behavior. You touched on that. We are trying to do all of the above. From, in the climate action plan, we talk about 6 different pillars of our strategy here: reducing emissions, carbon sequestration, innovation, education, regulation, and advocacy. And we publish all of that in hopes that others might find useful ways within it to really take on their own climate action journey. That's number one. Number two is we try to be a very vocal customer to our supply chain. And everything that I named that we're asking of in that sustainability exhibit, the legal document, we're doing ourselves. And we are also communicating that downstream to our customers as well. And last but not least, because in this emergency, what we need more than anything is everyone to do what they do best. It's true at the individual level. We need artists to make art for climate action. We need lawyers to file lawsuits for climate action. We need software developers to write code for climate action. But it's also true at the company level. Every company's biggest sustainability action, biggest climate action, really has to do with coupling what they do best to bold climate action. What does Salesforce do best? We, over 22 years, have put digital tools in the hands of our customers to help them navigate successfully into the future through things like mobile and social and IoT and blockchain and AI, and now climate change, which is going to hit every one of our customers simultaneously around the world, regardless of industry, and we need to put transformational tools in their hands to help them succeed in that next chapter for themselves. And that's where Salesforce Sustainability Cloud and all the great things that we announced today related to that product comes into the picture. Plus, of course, our Customer 360, because like I said earlier, the customer relationship is inseparable from value chain decarbonization because each link in that value chain is a customer relationship.
Well, you literally took the words right out of my mouth because I was going to ask you about the Sustainability Cloud 2.0. And so can your customers, can clients now start to use this today?
Yeah.
And implement it in their daily?
That's right. So the story of Sustainability Cloud is great. We built it ourselves because we built it ourselves for ourselves because we knew that our greenhouse gas emissions data overnight was going to need to look like the quality of our financial data. We needed a comprehensive system of record. We needed a single source of truth and a place to find insight. It was such a success in our own hands that we brought it to market about a year and a half ago. And the response has been great. We're going to hear from Mastercard in a little bit about how they've been using it. And what we announced today is an additional 3 different things. Number one, after the close of our Slack acquisition, which we're so excited about, it's Slack first sustainability. You can use Slack in order to engage and exchange information up and down your value chain related to greenhouse gas emissions. Number 2 is climate action planning. Whereas the tool started as a single source of truth for the footprinting process, more or less sort of a retroactive look at your context, climate action planning turns the camera into the future, and you start to be able to develop scenarios and what ifs and get recommendations about what to do to decarbonize, and also how to invest and compensate for any emissions. And that's where number 3 is so exciting. It's an exchange, a carbon marketplace, a place to support nature-based solutions, a place to collaborate on policy moments that matter for your company. And we are just also so excited about the news related to nature-based solutions and trees, which I touched on a little bit. Trees are our best solution for drawing carbon out of the atmosphere right now. We are losing a football field worth of forest approximately every second right now on planet Earth. And so, we need everybody to join us in the trillion tree movement. Salesforce helped the World Economic found 1t.org. The goal to see the conservation, restoration, and planting of 1 trillion trees on Earth over this decade. We set our own 100 million tree goal that same time, and like I said, we're already over 40 million trees towards that goal.
Fantastic. And so from here, what is the next goal with the 1t.org?
The next is the Global Citizen event.
Oh, okay.
Coming up this Saturday. I hope everybody is going to stick around through the weekend. Central Park. Global Citizen is rallying support for the Race to Zero and 1t.org. We've gotten a tremendous amount of companies involved in setting their own tree goals and joining the Race to Zero as well. So join us Saturday in Central Park, set a tree goal, join the Race to Zero. That's what's next.
Absolutely. And I just have one more question for you. So, when people think about achieving net zero, they see it as maybe something daunting, that how can I possibly achieve net zero while growing a business, while growing the economy? So what would you say to some of the naysayers who fear economic slowdown in their quest to achieve net zero?
First is you look around at all of the signs that we're seeing from a planet that's, really just being pushed to the brink. Flooding, fires, drought, extreme weather events of all types. It's crystal clear that the cost of inaction on climate is far greater than the cost of action, right? And it doesn't need to be viewed as a cost of action in the first place. This is a way to create jobs. We've got the Civilian Conservation Corps from the 30s. And now a similar moment taking place in Congress to see tree planting, a core for tree planting, job creation, equality. And so climate action for the business sector too is really a way, I think, to succeed and outcompete. Every business out there can think about who is your most climate engaged customer right now. Because without a doubt, as surely as the sun's going to shine on Earth tomorrow, more of your customers are going to look like that most climate-engaged customer does today. And so if you want to succeed and grow and find a pathway for innovation that's really going to work, follow that customer. And that's a big piece of why we're also trying to be such a vocal customer to all of our suppliers, because we can model what that most climate engaged customer and what the relationship needs to look like is going forward.
So there's growth there.
Yeah.
There's growth, economic
Yeah.
growth, prosperity.
Yeah, opportunity, innovation, growth, resilience, and at the individual level, this is the most exciting career path you could be on, right? The UN a couple years ago put it that we need rapid, unprecedented changes in all aspects of society in order to have a 1.5-degree future. So every job needs to change. All aspects of society means what you do in your organization is a place where climate action can happen, and you need to raise your hand, raise your voice, find the team in your organization that's leading this charge, offer to join them, and use your brilliant self in this most epic adventure that humanity's ever seen.
And on a personal note, how did you get involved, and where did your passion for the environment come from?
Yeah, completely by accident. It was here in New York City. I was designing high-rise buildings, HVAC systems for high-rise buildings. And I got to see firsthand just how disconnected things were. That we were designing buildings that would last for a really long time, but optimizing them to make the most amount of profit for somebody on day one that probably was never going to live in the building, probably wasn't going to own the building very long, right? And so it captivated me as a puzzle to solve. Why is this so broken? Why are the incentives wrong? How is this communication so bad? And that propelled me into it first as this puzzle to solve, and then only over time just realizing the gravity of what I was captivated by. And so now it's more than a job, it's a calling. I work for Planet Earth, and Planet Earth has a lot of demands right now on people who work for it, and the tools I bring to my job for Planet Earth is the company called Salesforce. And what are all of the tools in that bag that we can use, from using our voice and influence over suppliers, customers, policymakers, employees, our operations across the full value chain, and our superpower, technology in the hands of all of our customers to help them reach net zero faster.
Fantastic. Well, I'm excited to hear your conversation.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
And I touched on Sustainability Cloud a little bit. We're going to hear about Mastercard's experience with it, but even before that, we are going to run a quick video so you can see it for yourselves. Layla, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Thank you.
I'd like to welcome on stage Christina Cloverdance from Mastercard.
Hi, Patrick.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Good.
We're at a conference.
I know, in person, socially distanced, and here we are.
Exactly.
Excellent. Doesn't it feel good to be back with a live audience and the online audience?
Yes.
Cool. Well, thank you for joining us.
Thanks.
Oh, let's start with the basics. Your role, your journey into sustainability. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks so much, Patrick. So I have the privilege of leading Mastercard's ESG sustainability strategy. And it's interesting, Patrick and I talked before this, and for the last several years, I would always get the question of, well, what does Mastercard have to do with the environment or sustainability? And I love that question. If you think about Mastercard, we're a technology company, a payments company, and we, for the last, decade or longer, which has really been in our DNA, this whole idea of doing well by doing good, we had focused on moving 500 million people into the formal economy and really moving them from poverty to prosperity. We hit that goal last year, and ahead of target, we decided to double down. So now 1 billion people into the formal economy. And so as a company, we're really focused on creating a more sustainable and inclusive digital economy. And so when you talk about the planet, there is no business, there is no society, none of it can exist without the planet.
Yeah.
And so for Mastercard, it's interesting, our own environmental footprint is not that significant. We don't make anything. We don't manufacture anything. We're not an extractives company. But we have this unique positioning with our network in the sense that we actually have a reach of, we work with 20,000, I think, banks who issue the cards. Consumers use those cards at 70 million retailers and merchants. We have a reach of nearly 3 billion cardholders.
Wow.
So if you think about that, we actually have a role to play, as we see it, an opportunity and an obligation to help shift consumer behavior. Because, as you mentioned, I mean, this planet is precious. We know that as society continues on the patterns that we're on right now, we're going to deplete the natural resources of the planet. So we have to change things. So at Mastercard, we see that we have an opportunity to help shift that. So we'll talk more about that, but that's the kind of impetus. And you asked the question of how I got into it.
Yeah,
I loved
tell
your
us.
story of the built environment. And so for me, I come at it from a different angle. And isn't it fun? For all of our peers, it's one of my favorite questions of
Yeah.
like, where did you come into it from? Because you have all different areas. And for me, prior to joining Mastercard, I was at IBM and I was on the business side. And then I had worked my way over to managing corporate sponsorships with professional sports and entertainment. And I'm sure you're thinking that has nothing to do with sustainability. But what it did at the time, we were using our technology to run these very high profile events. And so in my mind, I was thinking, well, couldn't we use this technology to help societal issues? And so I moved over then to corporate responsibility and sustainability.
Yeah.
And then that moved on over to MasterCard. And I've
Yeah.
had the
Oh, I
privilege.
mean, it's so true. You ask anybody in our collective line of work how they've gotten where they are, and it's always such a personal, interesting, typically indirect story of pursuing impact. So, you know, it sounds like your superpower is this incredible reach that you have. 1 billion people from poverty to prosperity, 3 billion cardholders. Tell us a little bit about how, you know, how do you think about your superpower lined up to climate action? What does that intersection look like?
Yeah, so yesterday morning, we actually announced our first Sustainability Innovation Lab. And it's in Stockholm, Sweden, and which is not surprising because the Nordics is very ripe and ready for these type of things. And the impetus of that was really looking back at, we are a technology company. When we can bring to bear the resources of our company, we had done that with created a lab for financial inclusion and then also for cyber resiliency. So it was logical for us to then focus on environment. And so it's really threefold. One, on investing in R&D for climate solutions. Co-creation, because as you mentioned earlier, this is bigger than any one of us.
Yes.
We have to work together. And so co-creation with fintechs, entrepreneurs, other private sector companies, how we can really create the solutions, the disruption that we don't have today that we know we're gonna need. And then the third thing is on the customer implementation of those type of solutions. And so let me give you an example, because I'll bring it to kind of something tangible. We partnered with a fintech out of the Nordics called Economy. And if you think about it, you know, we use our debit card or, you know, credit card, you know, all day, or a prepaid card all the time, and you get the financial cost of what that is. You know what it was. But we're now able, through bringing this onto our Mastercard network and offering it through our banks, to be able to share with consumers the carbon cost of their purchases. So you talk about this, you're hearing, you know, all sorts of this week of net zero and country commitments and company commitments, and you think about down to the individual, a lot of people think, well, what difference can I make?
Yeah.
And part of it is starting at this awareness stage and really helping inform, and so that people kind of can start to understand that so that they can make some different choices. And so that's just one example of how we're really trying to, one, inform, and then incentivize and enable and equip consumers to not only change their behavior, but begin to compensate in a way for their behavior. And so whether that is contributing back to tree planting, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, but that's just one way that we're looking.
I love it, and you know, I think about the customer relationship so often because of the Salesforce CRM context, but there's a customer there, right? Like that is you engaging more deeply with your customers.
Well, and it's an interesting, because it's a B2B to C
Yeah.
and a B to C in that situation, because I mentioned those 20,000 banks. They're all trying to provide climate solutions to their consumers. They're getting the questions from investors and stakeholders as well. And so we're partnering with them to jointly bring those things to,
Yeah,
to the
so
market.
so you tap into your superpower. You've got this innovation lab, which sounds so cool. We have to go visit. If we roll that up to the corporate level, talk to us a little bit about your big goals: net zero, science-based targets. What do you have at the company-wide level?
Yeah, it's a great question, in the sense that, as I mentioned, our own environmental footprint is relatively small, but we have to do everything within our power, which is our own operations, our supply chain. And so several years ago, we were the first in the payments industry to set science-based targets. No good deed goes unpunished, and we set them at 2 degrees, and then the guidance changed, and so we reset them at 1.5. And then we were 100% renewable and joined RE100 to ensure that we were doing that in the best way possible. And then earlier this year, we announced our commitment, net zero by 2050. And it's interesting because you asked kind of at the corporate level, there are a couple other things that we did along with that to ensure that this really, we were walking the talk, in the sense we tied our executive compensation for ESG targets, to our ESG targets. And then we did another thing of linking our financing through our first sustainability bond, so both our green and our social. So really trying to tie all this to the fabric of our business.
Yeah, I mean, just a reflection for a second. We share so much, right? A culture that really wants to see business as a platform for change, a recent sustainability bond among us, using our superpower, and supply chain, and a focus on supply chain is something else I know we both share. So tell us a little bit about how you think about your upstream emissions and supply chain.
So it's interesting. So with our net zero commitment, 70% of our greenhouse gas emissions have come from our supply chain, not in our direct control. So, again, several years ago, we started really focusing on the strategy of how, and I think I heard you talking about engaging with our suppliers, and that very first step is, if you don't have the data, we all know you can't manage it if you can't monitor it. And so there was very much this working with our suppliers to encourage them to report to CDP, to set targets. But it's interesting that even as companies the size that we are, with the resources that we have, CDP is a very onerous process. It can be, and so not all your suppliers have the capability and the resources to do that. So one of the things that we had done recently was we joined the 1.5 supply chain leaders and the SME Hub, which is helping then some of the smaller suppliers be able to start to report their emissions data without being kind of blocked with not being able to do it all. So that was kind of the first thing that we did. And then the second thing that we did, which I'm actually sitting here thanking you, because we brought on then Salesforce Sustainability Cloud, because we've been managing our supply chain data, but in a very manual way. And so we partnered with Salesforce and Accenture as well to help us bring it on. And it's interesting because I'm by no means, I have smart people that are behind the scenes, and you need to know every one of them because they're wicked smart. And so I asked them along the way, I was like, are you sure it works? Are you sure this is gonna help us? And they're like, Christina, we're gonna try to break it. And every time I'm like, did you break it? Did you break it? And they're like, we can't. So I will say that was very comforting. But the interesting thing is that with it, what it is going to help us do is going forward, and because there is a whole lot of an unknown, going forward as to how we're going to decarbonize our supply chain. And so with that data, we are now able in seconds to be able to pull things, have access to it, to make decisions in a way that are much better. I will tell you the one thing, when we kind of talked about this, integrating it with our business, and I'm sure you're finding this right now as well with ESG, is that It used to be we were knocking on doors trying to convince people of things and the importance, and now, you know, the whole business is really engaged in it. And so one of the things that I'm interested in looking forward with Sustainability Cloud is being able to actually have owners throughout the entire business allocated to our suppliers with this, and the ability to provide data to them, to manage that, to be able to help drive that. I feel now we have at our fingertips in a way that we didn't have before.
Yeah, it's an enterprise-wide system of record, right? It's a foundation upon which you can build so much, including that relationship with customers. And you know, in our case, one of the big benefits is the third-party review, the third-party audit process. You know, so we, as a minor aside, I'll just explain something we went through. The very first time we used Sustainability Cloud, it took our footprinting process from 6 months to 6 weeks. We had our environmental books closed before the finance army had closed the financial books for the company. And one of the big sources of time savings is that third-party review process. And it comes to mind because when you say distributed owners throughout the business doing their part, from a third-party review standpoint, that sort of governance and making sure the business leader responsible for that data is engaged, signing off, and with, you know, Slack, you can communicate back and forth with them. It's a really powerful thing.
You just touched on something really interesting that we're seeing right now is of the ESG, the G part. Oftentimes, it was just, you thought of it a bit differently. Now I think this G has this profound overlay across everything. And so what you just talked about is whether it's third-party assurance or different other parts of the business are needing, you know, access to data, which means we need that, you know, in the way that we have it now. So
yeah, that's so very true. I love hearing your use of Sustainability Cloud and how it shifts what?
I just want to inject with one other thing, because I think that, and this is a down the road, and maybe we partner with this. We haven't talked about this. We have no idea what I'm getting ready to say.
Yeah. We'll review this tape later when whatever this brilliant idea is comes to pass.
So it's interesting when we're thinking about our supply chain and, you know, our net zero and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. There are also so many all other important critical aspects that are being posed on our supply chain as well, whether it's with supplier diversity, you know, modern slavery, different things. And so now what I'm looking forward to in, you know, kind of a next generation down the road is how we begin to meld all of those, you know, together so that we're not looking at them separately, because they are also the same supplier.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Totally right. You know, the backdrop of that is no company is going to be judged by its operations only ever again. We're in an era of full value chain, right? The diversity and inclusion of your full value chain, the greenhouse gas impacts of your full value chain. And so a single system, a single source of truth to engage with suppliers and customers and bring that data in, collaborate.
And so that's the thing that I think is also a huge opportunity in front of all of us, in the sense that we share so many of the same suppliers.
Yes.
We haven't yet tapped this really, how we can drive this collective action, because we do share. And so that to me is, you know, a really open opportunity that we have.
I think so too, and you know, it's a piece of the exchange that I mentioned related to Sustainability Cloud 2.0, which we just announced at Dreamforce over in San Francisco, happening right now. There's so much opportunity for collective action here on the policy front, on the supply chain engagement front, innovation, all of it. You know, we're on the same team in a lot of ways. We're all thinking about how we rise to meet this climate challenge, and all of the best solutions ahead are going to be of the collaborative variety, don't you think?
Yeah. Should we talk about trees?
Yeah, that's what I wanted. That was the next move. You know, so another thing we share and collaborate on is the Trillion Tree Movement. You've got your own tree goal. I'm so appreciative. Tell us about what's going on.
Well, so you mentioned 100 million trees. We have 100 million. That's a lot of trees.
Yeah, you have 100 million trees too.
Yes, we have 100. Yeah, so I mean collectively. And so it goes back to this idea of how we started, about the role that we can play with Mastercard. And so A year ago, we created the Priceless Planet Coalition, and we now have 70 partners that are part of the coalition with us. And it's this commitment to plant 100 million trees. And the interesting thing is, which is something that I love, is that we all come at these different solutions from just like a slightly adjusted lens, because we all have different, as you mentioned, kind of superpowers of what we can do. And so the idea of our Priceless Planet Coalition was that with these partners, it's not philanthropic dollars, but we're actually engaging with our partners to incentivize consumers through campaigns. And so if you imagine different things, like if you use your Mastercard for public transportation, that would turn into, you know, trees being planted. If you go paperless, or you round up at the point of sale, or with certain retailers. And again, that's how we can begin to kind of shift this consumer consumption, but also attach it to this incredible, incredible need to preserve the, you know, the environment and the critical aspect of nature-based solutions, in which you talked about earlier. And so, again, it's bigger than any one of us. So, you know, for us, the Priceless Planet Coalition then, and then you bring that with what you're doing and the 40 million trees that you just talked about, but then to raise it up even higher. And so when Patrick mentioned the trillion trees, the World Economic Forum has the 1T.org, and there's a global chapter, and then there's also a US chapter, which I have the privilege of chairing. And the great thing about this is that we might be standing here in front of you talking about trees. It is not our day job, and we are not the experts. And so that's why it's so critically important that, yes, nature matters, but science matters, and then business has a role to play. And so that's why things like 1T.org, we are pulling in all sectors, whether it's the government, whether it's NGOs, whether it's different private sector, because it really is going to take all of us to provide those solutions and to get there.
Yeah, that's right, and it's that sort of mobilization that really is going to make it happen, and it's about so much more than just tree planting too. I mean, that's at the individual level. There's something so incredible about planting a tree, having a connection to it. We can all relate. We all have, you know, a tree we can picture that we have a warm place in our heart for. There's such a personal connection, but it's also first and foremost about conservation and ecosystem protection, and not just tree planting, but also saving the trees we have and the ecosystems that we have.
That's what we talk about. You're right, it's easy for the one-to-one to talk about planting a tree, but we really talk about it in the sense of regrowing forests. And because it isn't just a seed in the ground, but it actually is the growth of that. And so one of the things that we're really focused on is, in that we've been partnering with Conservation International and WRI, as I mentioned, the smart people who know how to do this, on creating this really a new model of global private sector reforestation at scale, with the rigor to have the monitoring and the maintenance, so that we really have the accountability and that there is the growth of that, so that we can scale this. And so that it is about regenerating, and that it is about growth, and it's not just about planting a tree.
Absolutely. Christina, thank you so much for joining us.
You did pretty good.
You know, and you know, let's just think about and appreciate all these seeds that we're planting now, all the conversations that are going to happen in the break ahead and between us, just what amazing things are going to grow from all of that. So thank you to the Nest Summit and Climate Week NYC and the Climate Group. Thank you everybody here in person, and thank you everybody online. We're time for a short break now.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.